Before the valet at the Halcyon Hotel lifted his hand to signal the next car forward, before the revolving door spun a fresh gust of winter air into the marble lobby, a man in a charcoal overcoat walked through the glass entrance and stopped so completely that the bellhop behind him nearly collided with his shoulder. 6 years. 6 years of men in 3 cities looking for a woman who had vanished without a suitcase, without a bank transaction, without a single photograph posted to a single account anywhere on the internet. And here she was, standing at the front desk of a hotel he had walked into for a meeting he no longer cared about, with a small boy at her side who turned his face toward him with the same unmistakable family resemblance Lachlan had grown up seeing in old portraits. Except there were two of them. Two small children. A boy and a girl. The girl was looking up at her mother. The boy was looking straight at him. And the boy had the exact color of eyes that Lachlan Wraithmere saw in the mirror every morning. The woman turned. Her face went white. And a man whose name had frozen rooms across 4 states felt his own knees lock beneath him, because even the mafia boss could not walk away from what he had just seen. The Halcyon sat at the edge of Marchwater Row, a district that had been built in the 1920s for steel money and had aged into something that still remembered the feeling of being important. The lobby had a ceiling of pressed tin, painted cream, and a chandelier that no one had cleaned in longer than anyone wanted to admit. The carpet was burgundy, worn to pink along the path between the revolving door and the front desk. In the corner, near a velvet armchair nobody sat in, a grandfather clock ticked out of rhythm with the clock above the concierge counter, so that the whole room seemed to run on 2 slightly different kinds of time. It was the kind of hotel where businessmen took meetings they did not want their offices to know about, where anniversaries were celebrated by couples trying to remember why they had married, where a woman with 2 small children might check in quietly on a Tuesday afternoon under a name that was not her own and trust the staff to ask no questions. Ione Velabrook had chosen the Halcyon for exactly that reason. She had chosen it the way she had chosen every hotel for 6 years, by its oldness, by its slowness, by the kind of foot traffic that moved through it. Salesmen in tired suits, retired couples on weekend trips. Nobody from her old life, nobody from his. The desk clerk had already handed her the keycard. 1 more minute and she would have been in the elevator. 1 more minute and the children would have been upstairs eating room service sandwiches and watching whatever cartoon the old television could still receive. 1 minute. That was the margin she had run for 6 years, and today the margin had closed. She was 29 years old. She had hair the color of wet oak, cut short in a way that was practical rather than flattering, tucked behind her ears because the children liked to touch it when they were falling asleep, and short hair was easier to free from small hands. She wore a navy wool coat that she had bought 3 winters ago at a thrift store in a city she no longer lived in. Her boots were brown, scuffed along the inner ankles where she had walked thousands of miles pushing a double stroller that she had finally retired last spring. Her eyes were the kind of gray that turned almost green in certain light, and they had the quality of a woman who had learned to watch every exit in every room she entered. The twins were 5. Calder was the older by 7 minutes, a fact he reminded his sister of approximately once a week. He was the talker. He had opinions about elevators, about the color of carpets, about whether the gold buttons in lobbies were real gold or only the color of it. He was already asking the desk clerk how high the building went. Neris said nothing. She rarely did in public. She stood half a step behind her brother and studied the room with the methodical patience of someone twice her age, and when she had finished studying the room, she studied the people in it. And when she had finished studying the people, she studied her mother's face, which was the only weather report that had ever mattered to her. They were twins of the other kind, the kind that looked like siblings but not copies. They had different temperaments and different interests, and a private language of glances that Ione had given up trying to decode 3 years ago. Neris was the one who had noticed, 3 weeks ago, in a different hotel in a different city, that a man in a brown coat had looked at them twice in the lobby. And she was the reason Ione had checked out that night and driven 4 hours in the dark to a new place. Calder had his father's calm. Neris had his stillness. Ione had gotten the children ready that morning the same way she did every morning, carefully, patiently, and she had told both of them they were going to love this new hotel because the elevator had a little gold button that lit up like a tiny sun, and Calder had laughed and said, "Mama, you say that every hotel." There was a duffel bag at her feet. Navy canvas, worn at the corners. The only piece of luggage she ever traveled with. Inside it were 2 changes of clothes for each child, 2 for her, a plastic pouch of documents under names she had paid for in cash, a small photograph she had never shown anyone, and an envelope with $3,400 folded flat inside a paperback novel she had not finished in 2 years. That was her entire life. $3,400, 2 small children, and a navy duffel bag. At the front desk, just as she was slipping the key card into her pocket, she had felt the air change. It was the thing she had trained herself to feel. The shift in a room when a new presence entered. She had turned toward the entrance without thinking, the way prey animals turn toward a sound they have never heard but always feared. And there he was, standing in the entrance of the hotel she had chosen for its oldness, looking at her across a burgundy carpet, with her son staring straight back at him, and her daughter beginning, slowly, cautiously, to hide behind her leg. 6 years ago, on a Thursday evening in late September, Ione Velebrook had come home early from a pharmacy residency rotation because the hospital had sent her home with a migraine the attending physician had described as a kindness in light of her exhaustion. She had let herself into the apartment she shared with a man named Orrin Thresher without calling out, because her head was pounding and she wanted the quiet of their bedroom and the cool of the blackout curtains. She had dropped her keys on the small table by the door. She had hung her coat on the hook. She had walked down the hallway in her stocking feet, the way she always did, and she had heard something before she reached the bedroom door. A voice. A laugh. Her sister's laugh. Bera Velebrook was 2 years younger than Ione. Bera had moved to the city 4 months earlier, had been sleeping on their pull-out couch for 3 weeks while she looked for work. Bera had a laugh that Ione had known since she was 7 years old, and Bera's laugh was coming from behind the bedroom door. Ione stopped in the hallway. She did not open the door. She did not need to. She put her hand flat against the wall and she felt the plaster against her palm, and she listened to her own breathing go very slow, and then very shallow, and then stop entirely for what felt like the length of a life. She turned around. She walked back down the hallway. She picked up her keys from the small table. She put her coat back on. She left the apartment. She did not slam the door. She closed it behind her with both hands, gently, the way a person closes a door on a room where someone is sleeping. And that was the last time Ione Velebrook ever stood inside a home that belonged to Orrin Thresher. What she had not known, as she walked down the 6 flights of stairs without touching the railing, was that she was 7 weeks pregnant. She did not know it for another 4 weeks, by which time she was in a different city, working under a different last name at a small independent pharmacy that paid her in cash and asked no questions. She found out in a gas station bathroom off a highway exit, and she sat on the closed lid of the toilet for 40 minutes with the test in her hand, and then she stood up, washed her hands, and kept driving. She had never called her sister. She had never called Orrin. She had never told either of them she was pregnant, and she had never told either of them about the second heartbeat the ultrasound technician had found at her 16-week scan. Twins, one of each. She had cried for 10 minutes in the parking lot of that clinic, and then she had driven to a diner and eaten a grilled cheese sandwich and started planning for 2. Across the lobby of the Halcyon Hotel, 6 years and 4 cities and 1 ocean of silence later, Lachlan Wraithmere was not breathing. He had seen the boy first. That was what he would remember later, when he was alone in a car driving nowhere, trying to put the afternoon back together in his head. He had seen the boy first because the boy had been the one looking at him. A small face, round still with the softness of early childhood, turned toward the entrance with the unguarded curiosity of a child who had not yet learned to fear strangers. And in that face, Lachlan had seen his grandfather. Not his own face, his grandfather's. The same impression of the Wraithmere men that ran through the family like a signature the family never had to sign. He had seen the boy, and he had felt something tilt inside his chest, the way a ship tilts when a wave it did not see passes underneath it. Then he had seen the girl. The girl was behind the boy, partly hidden by her mother's coat, peering out the way Nerys always did when she was uncertain, though Lachlan did not yet know her name or her habits. She had her father's quiet, and she was watching him with a calm that no 5-year-old should have been able to produce under the circumstances, as if she had been waiting all her life for this moment and had already decided how she would behave when it arrived. Then he had seen Ione. For a long second he did not recognize her. Her hair was wrong. It had been long when he last saw her, long and heavy and the color of dark honey, and now it was short and the color of wet wood. Her face was thinner. Her eyes were the same. The moment their eyes met, the world around them went quiet in the particular way that only rooms can go quiet when two people who have not seen each other in a long time recognize what the other has become. She did not move. He did not move. The desk clerk asked something about the bellhop bringing her bag up. Ione did not hear him. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked. The chandelier swayed very slightly in the draft from the revolving door. And Calder, who had been holding his mother's hand the whole time, looked up at her face, then looked back at the man in the charcoal overcoat, then tugged his mother's wrist and said, in the clear, small voice of a child who had just made a discovery and could not possibly know what it meant, "Mama, that man has my eyes." Lachlan Wraithmere was 34 years old on the afternoon he walked into the Halcyon Hotel, and he had been looking for Ione Velabrook for 6 years and 2 months. He had not looked the way men like him were supposed to look. No soldiers sent to her mother's house, no threats to her sister, though a part of him had wanted it with a heat that frightened him. Her photograph never went into the hands of the men who worked for him with instructions to find her at any cost. He had done the opposite. He had looked quietly. He had looked the way a man looks for something he is afraid he deserves to have lost. His family ran what his father had run, and what his grandfather had run before that, a network that moved through the cities along the northern coast the way weather moves through valleys, without announcing itself, without asking permission. Lachlan had inherited it at 27, when his father died of a heart attack at a dinner table in a restaurant that no longer existed. He had not wanted it. He had taken it because there had been no one else, and because his mother had looked at him across the funeral and said, "You are the last one left, Lachlan. Do not let him win after he is already dead." He had been with Ione for 2 years when she left. He had loved her the way a man loves the one thing he has kept separate from the rest of his life. The way a soldier loves a photograph he carries in a pocket that never sees the sun. She had not known what his family did. He had made sure she did not know, because he had already decided, sometime in the first 6 months of knowing her, that he was going to leave it. He was going to hand the whole inheritance to a cousin who actually wanted it, and he was going to marry the pharmacy resident who did not ask questions about where his money came from and who fell asleep on his chest every Sunday afternoon with a medical journal open on her stomach. He had not told her yet. He had been going to tell her that weekend. And then, she had vanished. He had come home on a Friday night to an apartment that was exactly as he had left it, except that her coat was gone from the hook, and her keys were not in the bowl by the door, and the closet on her side of the bedroom had been emptied with a speed that suggested she had not stopped to fold anything, There had been no note. There had been no message. Her phone had been disconnected by morning. Her bank account had been closed. She had stopped at the hospital that morning, withdrawn from her residency citing a family emergency, and left the city before the sun set. He had not understood it. He had not understood it for months. He had gone to her sister's apartment, had stood in the doorway while Beira cried, and he had watched Beira's face very carefully, and he had seen something there that he had not been able to name at the time, but had turned over in his memory 1,000 times since. Guilt, not grief. Guilt. He had not asked her about it then. He had not asked her about it for 6 years, because he had suspected something that he did not want to be true, and because asking would have meant confirming, and confirming would have meant that the woman he loved had left him for a reason that was not about him, which was worse than if she had left him because of him. He had spent 6 years building a quieter life. More of the operation had gone to his cousin than his father would have approved of. A smaller house, no more carrying. And the thing he had always told himself he would do once he was free of all of it, which was to look for her. Not to find her. To know that she was somewhere, alive, safe, living the life she had chosen over him. That had been enough. That had been what he had told himself was enough. And now he was standing in the lobby of a hotel he had entered for a meeting he could not even remember the purpose of, looking at 2 small children who had his face and his family's face, and the thing he had carried in his chest for 6 years, the thing he had called acceptance, turned out not to have been acceptance at all. It had been waiting. He had been waiting. And he had not known it until this exact moment, when a 5-year-old boy looked up at his mother and told her, in the clear voice of someone who had only ever told the truth, that the stranger across the lobby had his eyes. Ione moved first. She did not think. She simply turned, slung the duffel bag over her shoulder in a single motion, caught Neris's small fingers with her left hand and Calder's with her right, and she walked toward the elevator without looking back. Calder took 3 quick steps to keep up, and she heard him say, "Mama, you're hurting my arm." And she loosened her grip without slowing, and she whispered, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry." And she kept walking. The elevator doors were open. A bellhop was inside, holding the door for a couple with suitcases. Ione stepped in. The couple moved over. Neris pressed her face into Ione's coat. Calder twisted to look back at the man in the charcoal overcoat, and Ione put her palm gently against the side of her son's face and turned it forward. The doors began to close, and a voice she had not heard in 6 years and 2 months said from the lobby side of the closing doors, "Ione, please." The doors closed. She did not hear what he said after that, because the elevator began to rise, and the sound of the cables and the hum of the old motor swallowed whatever came next. On the 4th floor, in a room with a view of the parking lot, and a window that did not open more than 4 inches, Ione locked the door with the chain and the deadbolt and the security bar that the hotel provided in a small brass holder beside the door frame. She set the duffel bag on the floor. She sat on the edge of the bed. Calder climbed up beside her and put his head against her shoulder. Neris climbed up on her other side and put her small hand flat against her mother's chest, feeling for the heartbeat the way she always did when she was frightened. "Mama," Calder said, "who was that man?" Ione closed her eyes. She did not have an answer that was both true and safe. She had known this day was coming from the moment she had seen the second heartbeat on the ultrasound screen. She had known it every morning when she got the children dressed, and every night when she checked the lock on whatever door stood between her children and the world. She had prepared for it in 1,000 small ways, by moving cities, by paying in cash, by never using the same last name for more than 18 months. And she had also known, in the part of herself she did not let speak very often, that she had never really prepared for it at all. Because what she had prepared for was a man who came looking for her the way Oren would have come looking, with anger and accusation, and the intent to take back what he felt had been stolen from him. What she had not prepared for was a man who said please in a voice that cracked on the second syllable. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table. Not her current phone. The other one. The one she kept charged and turned off and carried in the inside pocket of the duffel bag. The one whose number she had given to exactly one person 6 years ago, before she had disappeared. An old friend from pharmacy school. A woman named Sabine Quillery, who had known Ione before Oren, who had not liked Oren, who had pressed a business card into Ione's hand at a conference 3 months before she vanished and said, "If anything ever happens, this is the number. Not my personal one. This one. It will always work." Ione picked up the phone. The screen showed a text message from a number she did not recognize. It contained one sentence. "He came in alone. He did not have anyone with him. He has been alone every time I have seen him for 6 years." Ione stared at the screen. Then a second message arrived. "This is Sabine. I work at the Halcyon now. I saw him in the lobby. I saw you. I saw the children. I am asking you to read this twice before you run again." Ione read it twice. Then 3 times. Then she lowered the phone into her lap, and she looked at her son, who was watching her face with the serious eyes of a child who had always known that his mother's face was the weather report for his entire world, and she said, very quietly, "I need to think for a minute, baby. Can you and your sister look at the little book from the bag while I think?" Calder nodded. Neris slid off the bed and went to the duffel and pulled out the small cloth book they had read together 100 times, the one with the felt animals sewn onto the pages, and the children sat on the floor at the foot of the bed and began turning the pages together, and Ione sat on the edge of the bed and tried to remember how to breathe, like a person who had not just heard the voice of the father of her children for the first time in 6 years, say her name as if it were something he had been holding in his mouth the entire time she had been gone. A soft knock came at the door 40 minutes later. Not the heavy knock of a man who expected to be let in. A single quiet tap, the kind a person uses when they are trying not to frighten whoever is on the other side. Ione stood. The children were on the bed now, watching a cartoon with the volume turned low. She put a finger to her lips. Calder nodded. Neris did not look up. Ione went to the door and looked through the peephole, and she saw him standing in the hallway with his hands in his coat pockets, and his head slightly bowed. Alone. Behind him the corridor was empty. Corridor. She put her forehead against the door and she closed her eyes for a long moment, and then she undid the chain and the deadbolt, and she opened the door 4 inches, which was as far as the security bar allowed, and she looked at him through the gap. "I am not going to come in," Lachlan said. "I am not going to ask you to let me in. I am going to stand in this hallway for as long as you are willing to listen to me, and when you want me to leave, you tell me, and I will leave." Ione did not speak. "I want to say 3 things," he said. "Then I will go." "Say them." His voice was low. "First, I did not know. I have spent 6 years trying to understand why you left, and I have had suspicions, and I have not asked anyone to confirm them, because I was afraid of what I would do with the answer. If those children are mine, I did not know. If they are not mine, tell me, and I will walk away, and I will never look for you again. Second, I am not the man I was when you knew me. I have spent 6 years becoming someone else, because I thought at some point you might come back, and I wanted to be someone you could come back to. I know that is not a reason for you to trust me. I am telling you anyway. Third, he stopped. He looked down at his hands. He looked back up. Your sister. I have never touched your sister. Not the afternoon you think I did. Not any afternoon. I do not know what you saw or what you heard, but whatever it was not what you think it was. And I have been waiting 6 years to tell you that to your face." Ione's hand was on the door. She felt the weight of it. She felt the grain of the wood against her palm. She felt the distance between what he had just said and what she had carried for 6 years, and the distance was the size of her entire adult life. "You were not there," she said. "You were there. In the bedroom. I heard her." "You heard her. You did not see her with me." Ione's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "She was in your bed." "She was in the bed. I was not in the apartment." He took a breath. "I was at a warehouse on the east side, signing papers to transfer a property out of my name. It took 4 hours. I came home after midnight. The sheets had been changed by the time I got there. Your things were gone. I did not know until the next morning that you had been home at all." "Then who?" "I do not know who." His voice did not change, but something behind it did. "I have a guess. I did not confirm it because confirming it would have required me to do something to your sister that I did not want to do to your sister, because she was your sister. But I have a guess." Ione stepped back from the door. She did not close it. She turned around and she walked to the window and she stood with her back to him and she looked at the parking lot 4 floors below, and she felt, for the first time in 6 years, the particular vertigo of realizing that the story she had built her entire life on was not the story that had actually happened. Behind her, from the hallway, Lachlan said very quietly, "I am going to go now. I am going to leave my number at the front desk. If you want to talk, you call. If you do not, I will not come back. I give you my word." "Wait." She turned. She walked to the door. She opened it the rest of the way. Calder was sitting up on the bed watching. Nerys was behind him, peering around his shoulder. "Come in," Ione said. "Not for long, just come in. The children should see your face up close. Once, so they know it." Lachlan stepped inside the room the way a man steps onto ice he is not sure will hold him. He did not take off his coat. He did not sit. He stood just inside the doorway with his hands visible at his sides, the way a person stands when they want a child to know that they are not a threat. Calder slid off the bed first. He walked across the room in his small sock feet, and he stopped 3 feet away from Lachlan, and he looked up with the frank examining gaze of a 5-year-old who had decided, somewhere between the lobby and this moment, that he was not afraid. "You have my eyes," Calder said. "I do," Lachlan said. "Why?" "Because," Lachlan said. He paused. He looked at Ione. Ione nodded once, slowly. "Because I am your father." Calder considered this. He did not cry. He did not run. He turned around, walked back to the bed, climbed up beside his sister, and whispered something in her ear. Nerys studied Lachlan from across the room for a long moment. Then she climbed off the bed and walked to within 6 feet of him, not closer, and she said, "Our mama said our father was a kind man who could not be with us because of something that was not his fault. Is that true?" Lachlan's throat worked. He did not speak for several seconds. When he did, his voice was lower than it had been in the hallway, and steadier than he had any right to expect. "Your mother is a very careful woman," he said. "If she told you that, then that is the version of the truth she has been able to tell you so far. There will be more to say when you are older. Everything she has told you that matters is true." Nerys nodded. She did not smile. She turned and went back to her brother, and the two of them sat on the bed side by side and watched the adults with the unnerving patience of children who had grown up in hotel rooms. Ione gestured toward the small table by the window. 2 chairs. She sat in one. Lachlan sat in the other. She did not offer him anything. He did not expect anything. "How did you find us?" she asked. "I did not find you. I walked into this hotel for a meeting. The meeting was about a piece of property 3 blocks from here. The man I was meeting changed the location at the last minute. I was 10 minutes early. I have been 10 minutes early to every meeting for 6 years, because I have spent 6 years with nothing but time." Ione closed her eyes. "Sabine works here." "I know." You know. I know she works here. I know she was your friend. I have known for 4 years that she knew where you were. I have never asked her. I never will ask her. I have passed her in hallways. She has passed me. Neither of us has spoken a word to the other about you. That is a thing she did for you, not for me. Ione looked at him. Why did you not have her followed? Because you asked her not to tell me, and because you left. He said it simply. You got to choose. For 6 years, you got to choose. I was not going to take that away from you. I am not going to take it away from you now. She was quiet for a long time. Outside, the wind pushed against the window. Inside, the television murmured a cartoon song at a volume almost too low to hear. What do you want? She said. I want to know them. He did not look at the children. He kept his eyes on her. I am not asking for anything else. I am not asking you to come back. I am not asking you to forgive me for whatever you have had to forgive me for. I am asking, if it is possible, for you to let me know them. 1 hour, 1 afternoon, whatever you will allow, on your terms, in your city, with your rules. We do not have a city. Then I will come to whichever city you are in this month. For how long? For as long as you will let me. Until they do not want me anymore. Or until you do not want me anymore. Whichever comes first. Ione pressed her hands together in her lap. Her fingers were very cold. I have been running for 6 years, she said. I have been running from the wrong thing. You were running from what you saw. You saw what someone wanted you to see. Who? I will tell you when I know for certain. I owe you that much. I owe them that much. He glanced, very briefly, toward the bed, and then back at her. But I am not going to hand you a name I cannot prove. You have been lied to enough for one lifetime. Ione looked at him across the small table. She looked at the man who had walked into a hotel lobby 45 minutes ago and had, in 45 minutes, unwound the architecture of every decision she had made since she was 23 years old. I need time, she said. Take it. I need you to go now. I am going. He stood. He turned toward the door. At the door he stopped. He did not turn around. Ione. Yes. Thank you for letting me see them. I did not do it for you. I know. And he left. The door closed behind him. Ione did not move for a long moment. She sat in the chair by the window with her hands in her lap, and she looked at the carpet and she tried to decide which of the many things she was feeling she was going to allow to surface first. Neris came to her first. The girl crossed the room quietly, the way she did everything, and she put her small hand on her mother's knee, and she said, Mama, was that really him? Yes. The father you told us about? Yes. Neris considered this. He did not seem like a man who could not be with us because of something that was not his fault. No, Ione said softly. He did not. Was it his fault? Ione looked at her daughter's serious face. 6 years of answers she had practiced in mirrors, in cars, in the quiet of hotel rooms at 2 in the morning, and none of them fit this moment. I do not know, she said. I thought I knew. I am not sure anymore. Neris nodded, as if this was an answer she could live with, and she climbed into her mother's lap and put her arms around her mother's neck. Calder climbed up beside them. He leaned his head against Ione's shoulder. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, in a voice so small it was almost not there, Mama, can he come back tomorrow? Ione's eyes filled. She pressed her face into her son's hair. Maybe, baby. Let me think about it. I liked him. I know. He looked at us the way you look at us. That was when Ione broke. She did not break the way she had broken on the side of a highway 6 years ago, alone in a car with a pregnancy test in her hand. She broke the way a person breaks when something they have been carrying for a very long time is finally, without permission, set down. She cried with her face in her son's hair and her arms around both of her children, and the children held still and let her cry, and Neris reached up and patted her mother's cheek very gently with a small hand that had learned, somehow, the particular rhythm of comforting a woman who did not cry often and who did not cry well. It was Calder who broke the silence. "Mama," he said, "I'm hungry." Ione laughed. It came out half sob, half laugh, the sound a person makes when their body runs out of room for any one emotion at a time. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. "Okay," she said. "Okay. We will order food. What do you want?" "Pasta." "Pasta," Neris agreed. "The kind with the little shapes." "The little shapes," Ione said. "I can do that." She picked up the hotel phone. She ordered 2 kids' pastas and a bowl of soup for herself that she knew she would not eat. She hung up the phone. She sat on the edge of the bed with her children on either side of her. The room was warm. The curtains were drawn. The television was on very low. And after 6 years of motion, Ione Velabrook allowed herself to sit still, without calculating the exit, without scanning the windows, without counting the minutes until she had to move again. She did not know yet what she was going to do. She did not know yet what she believed. She did not know yet whether the man who had just left her hotel room was the man she had run from, or the man she had run with, or something that had never quite been either of those things. What she knew was that for once, she did not have to figure it out tonight. Someone else was in the story now. And the not aloneness of that was, in a way she was not yet ready to name, almost harder to bear than the aloneness had been. Over the next 11 days, the story that Ione had carried for 6 years came apart in her hands in pieces small enough that she could examine each one before setting it down. Lachlan came back the next afternoon. He did not come to the hotel. He met them in a park 4 blocks away, a small park with a fountain that had been turned off for the winter and a playground with a metal slide that Calder declared the best slide of his entire life within 90 seconds of seeing it. Lachlan sat on a bench. Ione sat on a different bench, across the path. The children ran between them and around them and occasionally through them, and the 2 adults watched their children play and said very little to each other, and that was enough for one day. On the 3rd day, a woman named Sabine Quillery came to the hotel. She sat at the small table by the window with Ione, and she said, "I have worked at this hotel for 4 years. I have known where you were for 5. I tracked you down through a pharmacy licensing board a year after you disappeared, using the alias I guessed you might be working under. And when I found you, I made a choice. I have never told him. I want you to know that before I say anything else." "I know," Ione said. "He told me. He told you the truth. I would have known if he had not." Sabine paused. "I have also been watching him for 5 years. Not for you. For myself. Because I did not trust him when you were with him, and I wanted to know whether my distrust had been correct." "What did you find?" "I found a man who sold most of what his family owned to a cousin he did not particularly like, over the course of 4 years, for less than it was worth, because he wanted to be done with it. I found a man who moved into a smaller house. I found a man who stopped carrying a gun. I found a man who hired 2 investigators and fired both of them when he realized they might actually find you." Sabine looked at her. "I did not expect any of it. I owe you an apology. I thought he was the kind of man who would find you and drag you home. He is not that kind of man. I do not know if he ever was. I do know that he is not now." Ione did not answer for a long time. Then she said, "What about my sister?" Sabine's face did not change. "Your sister married a man named Velen Drake 2 years after you left. She has 2 children of her own now. She works at a marketing firm. She has been in therapy, according to a woman I know who knows her for 5 years. Has she ever looked for me?" "Yes." What did she do when she could not find me? She wrote you letters. She never sent them. She has a box of them. Ione put her hands over her face, not crying, just holding the weight of her own face. On the 6th day, Lachlan came to the park again. They sat on the same benches. The children went down the metal slide 82 times. That evening, after the children were asleep, Lachlan called Ione's room phone, which he had never asked for, and which Sabine had quietly given him that morning with Ione's permission, and he said, "I know who it was. I have known for 2 days. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Ione sat very still. "Tell me. Your sister was not in my bed that afternoon. A woman was. A woman who had been paid by a man named Orrin Thresher to be in my bed that afternoon, at that specific time, because Orrin Thresher had intercepted a conversation between me and a man I worked with about handing the family business to my cousin, and he had decided, for reasons that had to do with money he owed the family and debts he wanted to erase, that I needed to be discredited in a way that would destroy the relationship I had with the one person whose opinion of me mattered. He knew your schedule. He knew you had a migraine that day. He knew the hospital would send you home early. He paid a woman who looked from behind, from the hallway, through a closed door, very much like your sister. He paid her enough that she laughed on cue. And your sister was not in the city that day. She was in Brantford, visiting our mother's cousin. I have the travel records. I have the hotel receipts. I have the statement from the woman who was paid, which she signed 2 days ago in front of a lawyer, in exchange for not being charged with something she would have been charged with otherwise. He stopped. Your sister did not betray you, Ione. She has spent 6 years believing that you disappeared because of something she did not do, and could never prove she did not do. And she has never told you, because she never could find you. Ione did not speak. On the other end of the line, Lachlan waited. He did not fill the silence. After a long time, Ione said, Orrin. Orrin. Where is he now? He is in Halderley State Correctional for something unrelated. He has been there for 2 years. He will be there for 8 more. Ione closed her eyes. So he is not a danger to us. He has not been a danger to anyone for 2 years. He was a small man who made himself large by stealing the space other people should have had. There was a pause. Ione. Yes. Your sister does not know I have found you. I have not told her. I will not tell her. That is your call. Whenever you are ready. If you are ever ready. I will not be in that room. Ione held the phone for a long time after he hung up. On the 9th day, Ione drove, with her children in the back seat and Lachlan following in a separate car at a distance she had specified, to a neighborhood in a city she had not been in for 6 years. She parked across the street from a small house with a blue door. She watched the windows. After 40 minutes, a woman came out of the house. She was a little heavier than Ione remembered. Her hair was longer. She was carrying a bag of groceries from the trunk of her car to the front door, and she stopped halfway up the path because she had seen, across the street, a car with a woman inside it who was looking at her, and the bag of groceries fell out of her hands onto the path, and she did not bend to pick it up. Ione got out of the car. Bera Velabrook crossed the street in her house slippers, in the middle of the day, in the middle of the street, and when she reached her sister, she did not say anything. She put her arms around her sister and held on, and Ione held her back, and the two of them stood in the middle of the street for a long time. In the car, Calder pressed his face to the window and said, "Mama is hugging a lady." Neris said, "That is our aunt." Calder said, "How do you know?" Neris did not answer. She just kept watching. On the 11th day, in a small apartment Lachlan had arranged, but not selected, in a building Ione had chosen from 3 options, on a street Ione had walked up and down 4 times before agreeing to, Ione Velabrook unpacked a navy canvas duffel bag for the last time. She did not put the money back into a paperback. She put it into an account she opened in her real name at a bank she had avoided for 6 years. She hung her navy wool coat on a hook by the door. She put Calder's socks in a drawer. She put Neris's books on a shelf by the window. And she sat on the floor of her new living room, in the middle of her 2 children, and she cried. And this time it was not the kind of crying that had a reason. It was the kind that happened when a reason finally ran out. 3 months later, on a bright afternoon in early spring, the light came through the kitchen window of the apartment on Thornberry Lane in long yellow bars across the table. Ione was standing at the stove stirring a pot of pasta with little shapes in it. Calder was at the table drawing something with a crayon. Neris was on the floor by the window reading a picture book aloud to a stuffed rabbit that had once belonged, a long time ago, to Ione's own childhood, and that Beira had brought to the apartment in a paper bag 3 weeks ago on her second visit. There was a knock at the door. A light, specific knock. 3 taps. That the children had learned meant a particular person was on the other side. Calder looked up from his drawing. Is that him? Yes. Can I get it? You can get it. Calder ran to the door. He pulled it open without checking the peephole, which was a habit Ione was still training him out of, because old habits take longer to leave than to arrive. Lachlan was in the hallway in his charcoal overcoat, holding a small paper bag from the bakery 3 blocks away. He looked at Calder. Calder looked at him. You brought the sticky buns, Calder said, with the solemnity of a boy confirming a treaty. I brought the sticky buns. Come in. Lachlan came in. He did not come in every day. He did not stay the night. He had a room at a hotel on the other side of the river, and he drove across the bridge 3 afternoons a week. And on the afternoons he did not drive across. He did not call, because Ione had asked for the weeks to have a shape to them that was not his shape. He put the bag on the counter. He took off his coat. He looked at Ione across the kitchen. She looked back at him. They did not kiss. They had not kissed. It had been 3 months since the Halcyon Hotel, and they had not kissed. And they both understood that whatever was going to happen between them was going to happen on a timeline that honored what had been lost, and that the loss had been hers more than his. And therefore, the timeline was hers. He sat at the table with Calder and asked what he was drawing. Calder held up the paper. It was a picture of 4 people in front of a house, a tall figure with short hair, a slightly taller figure in a dark coat, 2 small figures holding hands between them. Above the house, in shaky green crayon, Calder had written a word. The word was not home. Ione had wondered, for weeks, if one of them would draw that word. Neither of them had. The word Calder had written was us. Ione looked at it from the stove, and she pressed her lips together, and she turned her face toward the window for a moment until her eyes were steady. Neris looked up from her book. She walked to the table. She studied her brother's drawing. She picked up a red crayon. She added, very carefully, a small rabbit on the grass in front of the house, and she looked at her mother, and she said, Now it is done. Ione turned off the stove. She walked to the table. She put her hand on the back of Lachlan's chair, lightly, for just a moment, and then she moved it. He did not turn. He did not reach for it. He had learned, in 3 months, the difference between a touch that was an offer and a touch that was a trial, and he had learned not to ask which was which. He let her decide. Outside the window, a woman was walking up the front path of the building across the street. A woman with longer hair than Ione's, carrying a bag with something wrapped in tissue paper inside it. Beira had called ahead. She was bringing something for the children. She came on Saturdays. Ione had not yet told her that Lachlan was in the apartment this afternoon, because she was not sure Beira was ready, and she was not sure she was ready, and she was not sure any of them were ready. But Beira was coming up the walk, and Beira was going to see Lachlan's car at the curb, and Beira was going to understand before she reached the door. Ione walked to the door. She opened it before the knock. Bera was standing on the threshold with the bag in her hand. She saw Lachlan at the kitchen table. She saw Calder beside him. She saw Neris on the floor with her rabbit. She saw her sister. She did not speak. Ione held out her hand. Bera took it. Ione drew her sister into the apartment. The door closed behind them, and somewhere in the long afternoon light on Thornberry Lane, in a kitchen that smelled like pasta and warm bread, 4 people sat down at a table meant for 4, and a 5th chair was pulled up by a child who had decided, without being asked, that the rabbit needed a seat of its own. Lachlan looked at Ione across the table. Ione looked back, and for the first time in 6 years and 3 months, she did not look away first. She was not the one who had been waiting, but she was the one who had been chosen to decide, and she had decided on a Saturday afternoon in spring that the story was not going to end in a lobby. It was going to continue in a kitchen, and in the long light of the window, Neris looked up from her rabbit and smiled at no one in particular. The way a child smiles when she has not yet learned that the world is supposed to be harder than this, and has decided, for the moment, that it is not.